Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 4, Episode 6. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. A new segment, and I think this is going to be a recurring segment that I'm going to be able to stick to. Lawyers, because people are dumb. I've never really made my profession a central part of this podcast, and I've never really wanted to talk that much about the law or the legal profession. I felt compelled, based on some of the stories that have come out over the course of the last 2-3 weeks, to start a segment called Lawyers, because people are dumb. As poor a reputation as the legal profession has, it serves a necessary purpose, and that purpose would not exist but for the fact that people are so dumb. I want to be clear that this isn't going to be a segment where we're going to highlight what are the lowlights of different individual people's lives, random people on the street. No, we're going to save our attention, our energy, our focus for those in seats of power, for those with education and knowledge and responsibility, for those people who seek the spotlight, for people that we assume know better, yet prove us wrong time and time again. Who's up to the plate this week? Well, one Fani Willis, the prosecutor in Fulton County. Who's doing what? She's charging a former president of the United States of America with election interference, a felony. And what does she do? She starts an affair with a married man and then hires him to help with the prosecution of that former president of the United States. And I will leave it up to you, dear listener, to determine which of these two stories is dumber, or which of these two stories has the dumber actor in it. Vince McMahon, former president of the WWE, as of about a week ago, resigning after being exposed for having a torrid affair, a disgusting affair, and I use the word disgusting specifically, a physiologically disgusting affair, as we will discuss in the segment, an affair with a young woman that he memorializes in text messages to who? That very woman. Thank you all of you who are listening. I really do appreciate your time and your attention. Please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star the podcast, send it to the peoples far and wide, friends and enemies alike. If you like what you hear, This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, Lawyers, because people are dumb, Fani Willis.
Lawyers, because people are dumb, even when they are lawyers, regardless of whether or not you are an attorney or you are even involved in any capacity or ever have been with the law. Can you imagine being put in a position where, as a county prosecutor, you were going to prosecute a former president of the United States of America? Can you imagine, not only are you going to prosecute a former president of the United States of America, you're going to do so for interfering in how the state ran its election and asking the governor of the state to come up with votes in order for that former president to win the state and thereby take its electoral votes and thereby potentially change the outcome of the general election. Uncharted territory in the history of the United States of America. The gravity of such a task, of such an endeavor, would no doubt weigh on your shoulders on a daily basis, realizing the scope of what you were about to undertake to prosecute a former president of the United States for election interference. You'd want to have the best staff that you possibly could on that case, and their reputations would have to be impeccable, because you know that you're going to be bringing on so much scrutiny on each one of those individuals. You're going to have an entire infrastructure, an ecosystem of innuendo and salacious rumors, all geared towards desecrating the reputation of all the people involved in the prosecution. And to be clear, it would not matter whether or not it was a Republican president or a Democratic president, a conservative or a liberal, We're talking about the President of the United States of America. People do not reach that office without creating allies, without being able to control a media narrative, without being able to destroy political adversaries, to destroy social adversaries. Fani Willis, the district attorney for Fulton County in the state of Georgia, had this responsibility bestowed upon her. And what did she do with it? She decided, I'm going to hire, as part of my legal team, my lover, who I have started an affair with while he's married and while he's managing the gravity of this matter, while he's involved in the day-to-day gathering of evidence against a president of the United States for electoral interference, he's also managing another legal matter. It's his divorce case to his then current wife. Now let's pause. Let's stop right there for a second and just assess what we have based on former president of the United States, based on criminal prosecution, based on electoral interference, based on a first in the history of the United States of America. And one of the people that you hire in order to engage in this massive endeavor is someone that you're having sex with. Dumb does not explore the depths of the stupidity. Stupidity does not explore the depths of the insanity. Insanity does not explore the depths of how poor a choice that is. It is almost if one would be blind to the gravity of what one was being asked to do, to prosecute a former president of the United States of America in a criminal trial, thereby creating a circumstance where the first president of the United States of America, after they left office, might go to jail. You hire someone on your team that is obviously going to be exposed publicly, that's going to be part of this scrutiny, a person that's going to be put under the microscope, whose past is going to be illuminated for all. You hire someone that you're having sex with, and you don't feel like that's something that's going to come out. You don't think that that's something that you might want to be concerned with, that you don't have that concern for the other person, for the sake of the other person. That alone shows an extremely poor lack of judgment. Let's take it up a notch, though. Let's say that the person that you're having sex with, although an attorney, doesn't really specialize in the area of law that one would need in order to take on a former president of the United States in a case where you are alleging electoral interference. This is not to call Nathan Wade, the man who Fani Willis was having this affair with, it's not to call him a bad attorney. He may be a great attorney. As an attorney, I can tell you that there are areas of the law that I would not want to step into in an extremely high-profile case where, absent my background and my personal history, not just my professional history, my personal history were at issue, if I didn't have the bona fides to take on such a case, I would not take it on. If you were hiring someone in a legal case that's this high profile and that is going to invite this much scrutiny, you'd want to have people with a bulletproof resume in their professional life and people with a bulletproof resume in their personal life. Now, none of us has a bulletproof resume in our personal lives. There's always some little piece of dirt somewhere that some private investigator can dig up. That's why most of us don't go into politics. You are inviting a whole different level of scrutiny into your life in the political arena. How would you think that you were going to be able to hire someone who didn't have the background and the resume and the track record in order to prosecute a former president of the United States for electoral interference of all things? That resume, those bona fides, that track record, the experience of having gone through similar cases, that's going to justify the money that you're going to pay to these attorneys, particularly when that amount of money might start to exceed $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, $600,000. I can't speak to the quality of work being performed by one Nathan Wade. I can speak to the fact that after having been paid $650,000 for his work on this prosecution of Donald Trump for electoral interference in the state of Georgia, Nathan Wade is going to have the privilege of justifying every one of the hours that he's spent so far working on the case. There will be a litany of parties poring over his billable hours to determine whether or not they're justified. The icing on this imbecilic cake has to be the fact that these two, Willis and Wade, went on trips together paid for by the state. Devil's advocate may come on and try to make the argument that these were business trips that were necessary as part of the prosecution of one Donald Trump. What does that matter? The implication is staring you in the face, devil's advocate. These two are lovers. One of them is getting divorced. One of them may be getting divorced for the very affair that they are engaged in at the present moment. Any opportunity for cohabitation is going to bring about the speculation that you're sleeping together, that you're not engaged in any business activity, that you're using the opportunity to get away together as an escapade, regardless if it's true or not. I've read at least one or two stories where there's speculation that some of the trips that these two took, they were not business related, and that they were just charging these trips off to the state. Now, there may be no validity whatsoever to that allegation, but given the circumstances, does it not sound plausible? I know we're going to get more about this story. I just have a hard time understanding what the thought process was between Willis and Wade, knowing that the ex, as the divorce was proceeding, is going to be hurt and jealous and vengeful and spiteful. And the two of them either thinking to themselves, it'll never come out, or if it does, we'll be able to weather the storm. I've mentioned it briefly on this podcast and other segments. The strongest case against Donald Trump is the case that's in Georgia. Everything was recorded. The telephone call between Donald Trump and the governor of the state of Georgia recorded. All of the representations made by the stooges that were working on the behest of Trump to try to prove that there were miscast or tampered with ballots. The circus show that was that administrative hearing with Rudy Giuliani, where he just flat out lied over and over again. This is all on record. It's all on video. Did they think that the case was such a slam dunk that something like a little affair would not affect the outcome? I don't even want to speculate, because the level of stupidity here, I don't even want to try to get into the heads of either one of these two people. Lawyers, because people are dumb.
Act 2, lawyers. Because people are dumb, Vince McMahon.
Lawyers, because people are dumb. And dumb doesn't really describe the depth of the next story that I want to talk about. Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, former president of the WWE, in one of the most outrageous stories I can remember regarding an executive of such a large company. I have not watched professional wrestling in decades. I'm not part of its orbit, and yet I do see on occasion these stats about how lucrative, how much money that organization brings in as really the largest promoter of professional wrestling in the world. It's $1 billion corporation. Vince McMahon's wife, she has to feel really good right now. She's a political influence in the Republican Party and in a number of different political movements, given not only her presence as an executive of $1 billion corporation, but the amount of money that they evidently donate to a number of different types of conservative causes. I was not going to comment on this story at all. I was going to throw in basically as part of another piece and aside about how stupid Vince McMahon is, being an executive in the kind of position that he was in, to have an affair in what can only be called the Donald Sterling mold. You have an affair with a girl that you just hire. This is someone who's starting out basically at an entry-level position within your company. So the power disparity, although it looks bad, the top-down view that we always adopt of powerful executive and powerless employee, in reality, once that affair occurs, it's the employee that has all the power, because this powerful executive is now beholden to the disclosure of the affair And regardless of the circumstances, it becomes a he said, she said. When you are the president of $1 billion publicly traded corporation, you have people to answer to. And that's namely the board of directors. And the board of directors certainly doesn't want to see scandal in the headlines that might influence the price of the stock. They certainly don't want to see scandal in the headlines that they know might last 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. Civil lawsuits, they linger. Civil lawsuits, they lead to depositions. Civil lawsuits, they have long, sordid lives. So I was open to speaking to this case in a very brief, in a very short, comedic way. And then I read an article about the allegations, and then I went and I looked at the actual complaint, and I read some of the allegations, and I thought to myself, there's something so much deeper here that I have to look at these texts. And these texts were difficult to find. There's only 1 or 2 posts about them on the Twitter. And as I have expressed numerous times over the course of the 4 years I've been doing this podcast, I don't like the Twitter. I don't like going to the Twitter. I felt compelled to do so based on how salacious and how damning these allegations were in the complaint. I had to do it. And so I read the texts that are allegedly between this woman who filed this suit against Vince McMahon and McMahon. And these texts are beyond damning. There isn't a meme, there isn't any term of art that I could use that would express to you, dear listener, as I was reading these texts, how shocked I was. Shocked is probably the only word that I can use to express it. And not so much shocked about what Vince McMahon had expressed or what was going on between him and this woman, just how stupid this man was in the position that he was in to be doing what he was doing. And in spite of all of that, to be so brazen as to memorialize all of it in writing via text. If you have not read these text messages, I highly recommend that you do so if you are interested in any capacity in what has been reported about this lawsuit. Vince McMahon came out and said he's going to defend himself vigorously, but in order to remove the spectacle from WWE, he's going to step down. Let's be clear. That's a lawyer's denial. That's a public relations denial. That is not an innocent person's denial. What one can determine very quickly in reading these texts and in reading the allegations in the complaint, if even half of it's true, the nature of the relationship between Vince McMahon and this woman was one of degradation. This was not about adventurous sexual exploration. In doing the research for this segment, I've read different comments. I've seen different videos from people saying, oh, Vince McMahon, you can't take the dog out of the man. He's in his 70s, but he's still virile. This story isn't really about sexual virality. This story isn't about progressive sexual exploration. It's about degradation. This story is about the links on these pornographic websites that you don't click because even seeing the thumbnails of what those pornographic scenes are about is disgusting. This woman alleges that in a threesome, having sex with Vince McMahon and another executive of the WWE, Vince McMahon shits on her. You heard me. He shits on her, and he demands that she continue in the sexual gratification of the other person as she has fecal matter falling away from her hair. That's the nature of this relationship. That's the nature of this story. Virality, my ass. Then you read about the backstory of this girl. I'm reluctant to use her name, and I'm not going to do it. The backstory is heartbreaking. She's in her 20s. She's either almost done with college or she's graduated from college, and her parents fall ill. And she puts her life on hold to move back in with her parents to help them convalesce. And instead of getting better, both of them pass away. She watches both of her parents pass away as she takes care of them. In the aftermath of such a traumatic event, she's somehow introduced to Vince McMahon, who gives her a job. Very soon thereafter, she alleges that that job is conditioned on a physical relationship with Vince McMahon. I don't want to speculate on this woman's mindset, on what she must have been going through in light of the fact that she's lost her parents, that she had to watch them both pass, and she is lost, that she doesn't have any direction after such a traumatic event in her life, how she must have been feeling. I believe we can all relate that she's probably looking for some sort of parental figure, some sort of authority figure to help console her and help shepherd her through those traumatic times. Enter one Vince McMahon. Beyond that, whether the relationship started out and she was deriving some sense of pleasure from it, whether she saw it as an adventure, whether or not it was complete and total duress, who knows? That's going to be the subject matter of the underlying litigation, and I'm sure that will be the point of emphasis for the attorneys defending Vince McMahon. A couple of things that I want to point out that I haven't seen covered in this story. First and foremost, his wife, Vince McMahon's wife, still works for WWE, and so any spectacle is going to reflect not only on WWE, given how inextricably linked he is to that organization, it's going to reflect poorly on his wife. So even though he stepped away from the organization, he still has pressure to settle this case and get it out of the spotlight so that the organization itself, the WWE itself, more than that, his wife won't have to answer any questions about it. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and this has been long forgotten, there have been cases where people have brazenly tried to defend the actions that they took in a corporate environment where you have to question what the lawyers who represented these people were advising, given the factual record. I'm talking about facts not in dispute, things said in depositions, things documented in writing. The biggest case, the one that always comes up for me, is James Dolan and Isaiah Thomas in the lawsuit that they faced as president and as owner, respectively, of the New York Knicks. I can't remember the woman's name who sued, and I'm not going to look it up. She was referred to by Thomas on numerous occasions, casually, in meetings, as bitch. Isaiah Thomas was accused of it. He was deposed. He was questioned about it, and he admitted it. What's more, he defended it. It may come as no surprise to you, they went to trial and they lost a $10 million judgment. Compare the allegations in that case to the allegations in this case, and we're looking at a hell of a lot more than $10 million in potential damages. And while I have no doubt that Vince McMahon is a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire, this was happening on company property between two company employees on company time. The WWE is clearly on the hook. They are clearly going to have to foot the bill for this. Just because Vinny Boy leaves the company and walks away doesn't mean that the WWE gets to walk away. On a personal note, shitting on someone while in the middle of a sexual act, I just don't get it. And I don't know that a lot of people get it, though I know one person who likely doesn't get it, and that's Vince McMahon's wife. Lawyers, because people are dumb. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.